Hi friends, thanks for joining me. It's a quiet night in the house here, and I'm going to, rather than watch Netflix, I'm gonna do a little bit of work on the TwoWeeksReady project for HTBox. That's the humanitarian toolbox. So I've done a bit of work on the stream previously on this one, and it is a project that's, we're building an app, I guess, for trying to promote basically being ready as a family for natural disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis and tornadoes. And we've spent a bit of time getting on the development side, just kind of getting the framework in place, getting the pieces in place for how we're going to build this application. A little bit of background in terms of the tool or the different pieces that we're using here. The app itself is a PWA, so it's a progressive web app. The front end is built in VueJS using the Vuetify library for all the UI components. And then the back end is done as Azure Functions. So there's an API there written in Azure Functions that connects to a Cosmos DB database to store data. To authenticate users, we're using Auth 0. And what else do we have here for moving parts? I think that's kind of the basics of it. And Carrie, also known as Coding Bandit, is the one kind of leading the project from the development perspective. And she recently, I was just having a look at what's happened recently on the project here, and one of the cool things she did was set up these code tours. I haven't really played with these yet, but I'm just gonna make sure I have the latest pulled down here. So there's two parts to the app, the API and then the front-end app. So we have the API in an API folder, and the front end is in 2WR-app. So each of those, if we go into those, has a README file in it. I'm just going to pop that open in Code, Visual Studio Code. And this guy here, if you look in the README, it talks about these code tours for onboarding. So if you go and install the code tours extension, you know what, I'm going to give that a try because I've never actually tried this and it sounds really cool. It's something that our friend Jeff Fritz pointed us to help with onboarding folks that want to help out with the project. So it says here, if I just install the code tour in here, is it already installed? Was it that quick? If I install the code tour, then I should be able to just see what code tours are available. So install the extension and review the tours available in the code tour folder. Let's have a look. So here's a code tour folder. And how do I actually view this thing? How does this work? Interesting. Oh, here, code tours. Open a tour file. Oh, cool. So it actually gives me shows me where the code is, tells me a bit about what's happening here. I can step through it, so it just steps me through the code and helps me with onboarding. So we have one of these code tours set up for the API on the back end, and then there's another one for the front end. So if you're interested in contributing to the project, that's a kind of an easy way to get started in addition to reading through the README file. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure that I can fire up the back end. I think I'm going to start with a little bit of work on the front end, but I'll need the back end. I'll need the API actually running for me to do that. How do I close this code tour? Close. Cool. Very neat feature. I like that. Anything that makes it easier to onboard new developers on a project is a great feature in my books. If you're following along and you have some questions about the project or about what I'm doing, feel free to just post a message in the chat there. We're live on YouTube and on Twitch, and I will be monitoring chat on both of those. Okay, so in order to run this, I do need, I'm connecting to a local Cosmos DB. So if I look at my local settings.json here, I have a connection string just pointing to the local host. I do have that already up and running here somewhere. So that should be fine. The only other thing that I need to run typically when I'm doing Azure Functions is Azure Functions likes to have a local emulator of Azure storage. And to run that, I run Azurite, which is a cross-platform Azure Blob, Azure Q emulator. So that should, I think, be all I need to do there. I should be able to just hit F5, and that should fire up the API for me here, hopefully with no errors. It's doing a func host start. There we go. So we have our functions app is running, and it's got a few different endpoints here where it's listening for things. And let's flip over to the front end app. So that's in the TwoWR-app folder, and I'll pop that open in another instance of code. I always open code from the command line just as code dot, which opens it up in the folder, opening the project folder that I'm currently in on the command line. Hi, Shay420. How are you doing? Thanks for joining us. Veeder can't find tsconfig. Okay, not sure what that's about. Okay, so this is the front end app. I'm just gonna close all these windows that are open. To compile and run my front end app, there's a npm script called npm serve. Good, glad you're doing good, Shay. We do npm run serve to fire up a development server here to compile and host that front end part of the application. And while that's just firing up, what I'm going to do is head over to the GitHub repo. So over here we have some issues. Carrie's entered some issues of things that we want to do. There's some kind of bigger features that I might start to get into tonight. We'll see how it goes. But I'm going to see if I can tackle this first one. It says just redirect to login screen if user is not authenticated. So that seems like a small enough piece of work that I could probably pick that up and tackle it today. So let's just do I'm going to assign it to myself so that people know I'm working on it. And let's see if we can see what's happening there at least. So, okay, it's running. I should be able to launch that in the browser. So here's the app. And what happens now is the reason this is a little bit weird is that I'm in the app now and I can click on like emergency kits, for example, and then it doesn't try to get any or maybe it even tries to get emergency kits. I'm not sure what it does. It tells me that error login required. Interesting. So I'm not sure what's happening there, but I would expect that if I try to go to these pages that require me to make an API call, that it would just redirect me to the login page if I'm not already logged in. And we do that because we can't make a call to the API without having authenticated with Auth0 and received an access token that we can connect to that backend with, so that the API can authenticate who we are and actually get the right data. Because when it comes to data in the database, in that Cosmos database, it's scoped to the current user based on who's logged in. It's not like everybody sees everybody's emergency kits. You only see your emergency kits. So I'm just going to log in, and then we can see what it looks like when I do log in. So once I do log in, I can come in here and it should actually make a call to get some data for me, hopefully, if things are working properly. Let's go to the network tab. So it did make a call to get emergency kits, but there are no emergency kits. Okay, I can add some. Whoa, interesting. I can add emergency kits. They have names. I don't really know why we define colors for them, but that's kind of fun. And that's like a really cool date picker, which is probably from Vuetify. Okay, so now I have my kits. Those should be in the database. If I refresh my screen, it should pull them back for me again. Yep. Cool. Okay, so logging out. Again, the feature that we want to try to do here is that if I go to any of these pages and I'm not logged in, that it just automatically redirects me to the login page. Let's see what we need to do that. If we look at these pages to start with, I'll just shrink my terminal down here because it doesn't need to be so big. Quick tour of the front end of the app. We have things like this emergency kit list component here that gets displayed where it lists out all the components. And when it goes to get that data, it's doing it through the $store. So it says $store.dispatch, and then it gives us this name of the thing that it wants to do. So emergency kit store / get emergency kit list async. So what we're doing here is we're using something called VueJS, which is a state management library for Vue that's kind of based on the same or similar patterns as Redux, if you're familiar with working with React and those libraries. And the idea is that we dispatch an action to the store saying, get me the emergency kit lists. And then when it's going to go and do some things and populate a list eventually, which will come back through this state here that we just map to something called our listing, which will be our list of kits. So it's a little bit like, what's the word I'm looking for? Lightly coupled, I guess. The coupling is not very strong there in terms of we're just saying dispatch this. We don't really care about how that happens, but go get the list. And then behind the scenes inside of Vuex, when it goes and gets the list, eventually it's going to update this piece of state that contains the list of kits. And then here we're just saying this is what we're interested in from our state is the listings, and then we just bind that to our UI. So here we have our data iterator, which we bind to that listings, and then we display each one with the color and the name. Okay, so somewhere under the covers of that whole thing that I just explained is going to be, so this is under the store. We have this emergency kit store that we talked about. There's going to be some logic. So here's the action that we were dispatching, and it's saying if we're online, because we're building this as a PWA that may not always have a network connection, especially considering the type of application that we're building here, where somebody might be opening it in an emergency scenario when literally the network might be down during something like an earthquake or a tsunami. You don't want to have to rely on the network being connected just to get your list of emergency kits so that you can know like where your things are and see your emergency plan. You want to be able to grab that, and if you're offline, just grab it from local storage somewhere. So we check to see if we're online. If we are, we try to get it from the server. Otherwise, we just grab that from the cache. And then we set that list, which is where it sets the state. So if we look at this API thing that it's calling, I'm trying to refresh my memory as I'm kind of walking you through this of how this is all set up. But okay, so we have a base API here where we grab the instance of that and we just tell it get the emergency kit. Somewhere in here it goes and grabs a token. Okay, so down in here it goes and says get Auth Instance dot get token silently, and that's getting our access token that we set as a authorization header on the request that gets sent to the API, and that's how the API is able to validate that we are in fact authenticated. And what I'm trying to remember with all of that is how does it wait here until all of that authentication is done before it tries to make the request. So I wonder if, can I just set a debugger here? Because I'm curious if I'm getting to the unexpected debuggers. Okay, that's fine, I think. Is it going to be okay with that? No, it really doesn't like me putting a debugger in there. Okay, I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way. Okay, so what I want to do is just see when I come in here, if I refresh this page when I'm not logged in, is it trying to get a token? Because I'm just curious how that's working right now. Ah, yes. Okay, so it does try to make the call, and then it, right, so it's making the call to get the token, and then it says, well, you're not logged in, so you shouldn't be doing that. So what we'd like to do is just stop that from ever happening. And the way I would typically do that is usually we're using VueRouter here in terms of mapping like this URL over to a certain page within the app. And typically what you will do is you will have certain, you have some kind of, I forget what they call it in Vue, I'll have to do some Googling here, but in Angular it's like a guard on that route that says you have to be logged in before you can actually get to this route. And if you're not logged in, redirect to the login page. So we're using VueRouter. Let's just load that up and see. One of the things I really love about Vue is that the documentation is really quite good compared to, I find, a lot of other systems. So it's well written, easy to understand in general. So it is called guards. Okay, so they have this concept of navigation guards. And I think what we're looking for here is probably a global before guard. So this would be, what we would do here is before each, to, from, next. Okay. You can register global guards using router.beforeeach. This is sort of coming back to me here. So they probably have a good example somewhere. Right, exactly the kind that I want. So here they're just saying if the route that I'm trying to route to isn't the login page and I'm not authenticated, then go to the login page. Otherwise, proceed and actually go to the route. So that's essentially what we're going to want to do is, oh, that's a bad example. So we don't want to do that one. What's the difference here? Oh, they do it if else next. Okay. Oh, because otherwise it would call next twice. It would call next to go to the login page, but then also proceed with the thing that it was trying to do. So they're saying just always make sure that you only call it once. Okay, so there is a way, I believe, with these routes. Let's go have a look at how our VueRouter is hooked up. So I'll just go to the entry point here and see. So we have a main.js, which has a on redirect, okay, router, which it's importing from router. There we go. So here in we're in router/index.js. That's where we're configuring the VueRouter. So here what we're going to want to do is hook up that before route piece. And the way I've done this in the past is that I add a little bit of metadata to these routes so that I can inspect it based on metadata instead of like having logic that's based on the actual names of the routes. Because there's certain things that I anticipate that there will be certain routes, certain parts of the app that you can go to without logging in, and that's totally okay. There might be like a news section or something, and you don't need to be logged in to get there. So I don't want to set it up so that it's just like every page you try to go to, it redirects you to the login page. So there is a way, I think, to add information to the routes. So let's see, there it is. Route meta fields, there we go. And their example is exactly what I'm looking for, requires auth. So we can just go and add that to, I think for now it will be all the pages, but let's just go ahead and add that. So if we, well, actually let's just start by going to this one and then we'll apply it elsewhere later. Okay, so we're going to say we add that little bit of metadata here that we require auth for that particular page. And now Heading back over here. Yeah, this is exactly the thing that we were looking for. So if this route requires auth, I can basically just copy and paste this and put it in. And then we're going to figure out what our actual login redirect for authentication looks like. So it's going to be a little bit different here than what they did. Okay, so they build up the router, and then we do router before each. Okay, so this is going to be the interesting part. So we're able to do the piece where we say if the route that we're routing to, if any of those matched routes, sum, what does sum do? Determines whether the specified callback returns true for any. Okay, I would have thought that would be called any, but okay, sum. It's saying if any of the matched routes that we're routing to require auth and we're not logged in, then we need to redirect. So a couple of things we need to figure out here is how do we know if we're logged in the context of this application? And that is done through our plugin over here, our auth plugin that we defined here. And fortunately, I've exposed something called a get auth instance, which will allow me to do this. So what I can do is, with this auth instance, once I get it, I can ask it if I'm authenticated. And I do that how? Refreshing my memory. I put this together, but it was a little while ago now, and I don't remember what I did. So we have login pop-up, we have logout, created, we have whether or not we're authenticated, and whether or not we're loading. So can I grab the instance? Is it safe for me to grab the instance and assume that it's finished loading? Is my biggest question here. This is kind of deep into the guts of the Auth0, the Auth0 integration for VueJS. But use Auth0. If there's an instance already there, we return it. Otherwise, we create the instance. And when we create the instance, where does it get loaded? Lifecycle method to instantiate the client. Okay, well, I'm just going to try calling it. I think I'm going to run into like a race condition, or not a race condition, but an issue with with it not being fully loaded yet, and it's going to think that I'm not authenticated. So get auth instance. Okay, so if not auth dot is authenticated, is this returning the right thing? It is. Okay, so the auth instance should have a property called isAuthenticated on it. I think that's how I can use this. Let me just double check over here where we were using it. So we said, oh wait, yeah, okay, yeah, that's good. Let's give it a try. So I think that's just going to be a matter of calling a method on the auth thing, but let's just see what this does. So in theory, now if I'm not logged in and I go to this page, I would expect to see this message that says redirect to login page. So it says I'm currently not logged in, which is what we expect. I go here and notice it's not actually sending me there anymore. I can still go to, well, I can't go to other pages because we don't really have them defined yet, but I can't get into the emergency kit section because it's telling me I'm not authenticated, so it's blocking my ability to get to that route. I believe that doing the redirecting to the login page is actually going to be very easy. I think it's just auth dot, it's either login or sign in, whatever I happen to call it. In this application, I'm not overly consistent between apps that I work on with the naming of these things. Login pop-up. I think we were doing login redirect, weren't we? Login with redirect. If we look at the page here, yeah, we're doing $auth is authenticated. We call login, and login calls login with redirect. Okay, so that's the method we want to call. Auth.login with redirect. So, popping back over here. Cool, that brought me where I expected to, which is good. Now I do my login real quick here. Is it going to work when I go back? It's logged me in. I'm now logged in. I would have hoped that it sent me back to the page I was trying to get to, but that's not too bad, at least. It got us where we wanted to go for the most part. What I'm curious is what's going to happen when I press refresh here. Okay, so that was hard to see, but what it did is it actually went and redirected me to the login page, and then the login page knew, hey, you're already logged in, what are you doing here? And then it sent me back to the app. And it sent me back to the app and kicked me back to the main page. So I'm in like a weird state where I kind of expected this was going to happen. And the problem here has to do with the fact that initially when I hit that refresh, it's like an order of operations of how all of this stuff happens. But I'm calling get Auth Instance here. And so I get an instance that was created over in the main.js. So my Auth0 plugin gets created when I tell it here, use Auth0 plugin. So it starts it off and it's creating it, but in the background it's still kind of loading some of those things. So it's initializing that Auth plugin. It's not done loading it yet. And we go and check the routes, or code in the route here goes and says, am I authenticated? And it thinks it's not, but the problem is it hasn't actually finished loading yet. So I am logged in, it just hasn't finished loading that information yet to know that I'm logged in. And so it kicks me off to the login page. So this is kind of a weird thing. I'm not entirely sure how we're going to solve this yet, but let's dig into it and see what we can do. So there's a thing, I'm hoping, a way that I can access. We create the client, that's a call to the Auth0 plugin, or the Auth0 JavaScript package. And what happens here? So we call created, which is actually a promise. Right, okay. So, right, instead of checking is authenticated, I should be doing it here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a method called isAuthenticated. And that method is actually going to be it's going to return a promise instead of just returning a Boolean. And what it will do is I added this thing where I can wait for auth0 to be finished and then check if I'm authenticated. So I'm going to wait on that promise, and then I actually don't even need the client. I'm just going to check is authenticated. Is that what I want to do? Because where did I set is authenticated? Well, that's a method on the auth0 client, so maybe I should just return that instead. Is that what I want to do? I think it is what I want to do. Let's see if it works anyway. So we will pass in this client. Client, oh, it's declared but not used. And what's it complaining about here is authenticated as a duplicate key. Did I already have this defined? Or is it a duplicate key with down here? Where is that a duplicate key? What am I missing here? Folks who are watching, is there something obvious here that I'm not understanding? Duplicate key. Oh, because there's a this.isAuthenticated? Right. Okay. I just want to see if this works, so I'm calling it isAuthenticated2, which is a terrible name. But then what I should be able to do here is say, wait. And I'm hoping that it's going to be okay with me making this async. And I don't know if that's going to be true. But we'll find out. Okay. I'm still logged in. I can go to this page, and now if I hit refresh, it left me on the page. So that did work. And I think then what we should do is, that's kind of weird. So let's take a step back here, and I'll try to explain some of this weirdness that we're running into. Okay, so inside of my auth plugin that I defined here, we expose a few things. There's data, which is like the isAuthenticated, the current user, that kind of thing. And the auth0 client. These are things that I expose through the plugin, and that makes it handy inside of components. So when I'm in the context of a component, it's convenient because what I can do is say in various places in my app, like trying to find somewhere where I'm actually doing this. I think it was on the app.vue. So I can do things like $auth.isAuthenticated, and it just gets me the value of whether I'm authenticated or not. And that's convenient. Like I don't have to call a method and await the result here. It's I can just get the data, and because it's exposed as data, it should update automatically when, like, my UI will update when the value changes. So that's convenient. But when I'm in the context of like outside of a component and I'm not accessing it through this $auth property, where like the initialization logic is already kind of handled, this gets a little bit more confusing, I suppose. So then I need to, in that case, I do want to wait until the auth0 client is configured and loaded. And what it's doing in the background is it's just loading that information from local storage. So when you go and authenticate with auth0, you get your tokens back, and it negotiates things using the magic that it does to do authentication, eventually you get these tokens, and what it does is it stores those tokens in local storage. So anytime I need a token, I just say, hey, Auth0 client, give me a token, and it checks in local storage and grabs it for you if it's there. So that thing that it's waiting for, that like block where it's like it hasn't finished loading yet, is when it's like waiting to get results to load things from the cache, and if it's not in the cache, then check in other places. So that's what's happening, and I want to wait for those results when I'm in the context of like the router, or when I'm over in my API files here, where I'm doing like these calls to my back end. I need to await. So maybe what I need to do is there a way to wait? So I added this concept of the Auth0 client promise. I don't really want to expose that, though. I suppose what I could do is if we had a method that was like something like is created. Feels weird. This whole thing feels weird. I wish there was a better way to do this. Just thinking through what my options are. Really only this is authenticated that's a problem. Like everywhere else where we're asking for things, we do it here. Oh, well, they all start with get, so why don't I just call it get is authenticated? That would solve that problem, I think. That should be sufficient to get us through this problem. Might end up kind of rethinking this a little bit, but now we just say auth.get is authenticated, and I await that result, and if not, then I tell it to go log in. The only thing is that I would really like it if, when I do that login redirect, that it sends me back to the place that I was coming from, instead of like bumping me back to the main page. So let's just test this again. We'll make sure that this is working. So I can refresh the page. If I log out, and then try to go there, kicks me over here. That's good. I think the only thing that's left is that I would really like it if it sent me back to the place where I was trying to get to when it sent me to the login page. But this is a good start. So let's go back here. This is all good, and what I'm going to do is tell all of these other ones that they also require auth, because I think they do, especially the create one. Settings probably will. I think that the like root prepare page is probably okay, because I don't see any like data there or any reason why you need to be authenticated. So I think that's all good. Just those two routes for now, and as we start adding more pages, we'll just have to make sure that you add the require auth to those when they're pages that need to be, where you need to authenticate first. And let's submit this as a PR, and then we'll see if we can add that one last piece to just make the process a little better. So what's my issue number here. It is number 22. 22. And before I push these up, I'm actually just going to double check what changes I made. So, okay, we got our get is authenticated method. We talked about that. And then we added this stuff to routes. So that was actually not a lot of code. I spent a lot of time talking about it and thinking about it, but didn't write a lot of code there. That's okay. I'm just going to do a git add. What was the text on here? It says, I'm just going to copy that verbatim because that's exactly what we're doing. I'm going to go ahead and submit a pull request for this. And then we're going to come back to it, and we might, before it gets merged, we might end up just making a little tweak to that. So this resolves number 22. Cool. That should kick off a build. There it goes. So we do have, in this project, we have CI/CD builds. So there's continuous integration that happens with every pull request. So before we can merge, we have a build that makes sure that the app actually builds. And we didn't introduce any issues there. And then when it gets merged into master, once that pull request gets merged, it actually automatically all gets built and deployed out to here. So to 2WRDev.Azure.net is always the latest version of the app that's installed, that's deployed up to Azure. And you can always go and test it out yourself. So you can log in, you can create your own account and everything with Auth0 there and test out the app as we're building it. Okay, so what I want to do is go see if there's a way when I do this login with redirect to pass in the URL that I want to come back to. Where is my auth plugin? There it is. So when I do login with redirect, I pass in O, which is just my parameters. Let's go see. So that's part of this guy. Let's go pull up the documentation for this thing. Where are the docs? Here we go, documentation. Creating the client, we did that already. Login with redirect. Okay, there's not much here for details. Is there more detailed documentation API reference maybe? There we go. What happens when I do here's the login redirect options. So these are the things I can pass in. So we've got a redirect URI, a fragment. What do all these things mean? Default audience. Used to store state before doing the redirect. Name of the connection configured. That's not useful. Use to add to the URL fragment before redirecting. So the redirect URI isn't the one that we want because that is that's like the callback URL that it redirects back to once the authentication is done. What would we be looking for? Use to add to the URL fragment before redirecting. don't think that's it either. Would it be app state? Redirect users after login. Yeah, that's not what I'm looking for. Or is it? Redirect users after logout. What else do we got here? Okay, you can create a deep link using, I think that's what we want, using your callback. Create a deep link using the which your, that's some weird language. Your callback would determine a forwarding path. Yeah, this sounds like the one that we want to use. Okay, so before redirecting a request to the identity provider, have the app generate a random string. The allowed length of the state is not unlimited. If you get the error, try a smaller value. Okay. Store the string locally. Add the state parameter. After the request is sent, the user is redirected back to the application and the state value will be included in the redirect. Okay. Note that depending on the type of connection used, the value may be in the body or the query string. Okay. Retrieve the returned state value and compare it with the one you stored earlier. If they match, then approve the authentication response. Otherwise, oh, this is for CSRF attacks. Okay, that's not the part that I'm interested in. Redirecting users is the one I was interested in. All right. Okay, so you can use state to encode an application state that will put the user where they were before the authentication process started. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Generate and store a nonce locally, along with any desired state data. Oop. If it matches, accept the message, fetch the corresponding state from storage, and then apply the redirect. So they're saying set the parameter that you use to mitigate the attack, as explained above. Store it locally with the redirect URL, so that would be like our route that we're trying to get to. Validate the response. This is all fine, except I don't know how to generate a random string that would make sense. Okay, well. Kind of an interesting approach, but Arbitrary number used only once. Cryptographic. There must be a package for this. This isn't something I should be writing myself. Returns a nonce, number used once. Hesitant to just like pull in any random library here for this. I don't know why. I should just use one, probably. How are these sorted? Popularity? I wonder if the Auth0 library has something in there. Okay. It's getting confusing. Window.crypto.get random values. Okay, interesting. I'm probably coming up. I didn't mention at the beginning of the stream, but I think I was planning to stream for about an hour. So I don't know if I'm gonna finish this part of the pull request here. But let's just see. Let's see if we can't. I just clicked on that one. Random string generator. Wow. Okay. Random string.generate 7. You know what? I'm just going to use this one. I think for the purposes of what I'm doing, it's going to be fine. Let's do it. It'll be submitted as a pull request, so if a reviewer thinks there's something odd about what I'm doing, that's an opportunity to have a conversation about it. Okay, how big is this library that it's taken that long to install? What are its dependencies? It only has one dependency. Okay, should be fine. This is fine. I don't know why that's taking so long though. We'll just wait a little longer. Oh, you know what? I should have stopped this. Yeah, that was my bad. I still had the dev server running while I was doing the install, which was probably not a good idea. Okay. So the place where we can use this is in the Auth plugin. So I'm going to import from random string. And what am I importing here? What's the export random string, which is a namespace. Okay, so I think declared but never used. Is that really what it's complaining about? I always get a little bit confused when we've got the examples as require versus let's see what they have on the GitHub repo here. How do I import this thing? Maybe that's fine. Let's just see what happens when I actually use it. So what we want to do is on the login redirect, we're going to add an option here for a route path. It's underlining everything in red when it's not used. Okay, so if I'm in the wrong method. We had login redirect somewhere here, right? So there's an O that's passed in. What I'm going to do is actually just, we're going to have a route path, and we're going to say if route path, then we're going to generate that random string and do those things that they were talking about. So we would have a const state nonce equals random string.generate, I don't know, like 10 characters long. It doesn't have to be very big. And then we need to, let's go grab that code from here. So this is going to be my redirect state, I'm going to call it, and I'm going to store that in. Is that how I want to do it? To store the nonce locally. Using it as a key. Okay. Expires on. I'm just going to keep it really simple here, and I'm going to call it the redirect state. So what I'm going to do is say local storage.set item redirect state. And it's going to look like this. There's going to be the key, which is the state, that value that we're going to pass over to Auth0. And then we're going to have the route path equal to, well, it's just going to be the route path. And then here we do json.stringify. My redirect state. And now when I do my login redirect, I'm going to pass it in state equal to the state nonce. Right. So we're going to pass in options, and here we're going to say options.start state equals state nonce. So that should do what we need to actually set that state when we call the login redirect. Next part is handling the redirect callback. So that's here. And how do we do that? What does it say to do? So when the callback happens, we're going to have the state query string. So I think what I need to do is go and grab that from the query string, which will happen here. So here, how do I grab the query string? Simple JavaScript stuff that I need to look up. Browser, grab query string. Things I don't do often enough to just know it off the top of my head. Cool, that's an easy way to do it. So this is going to be a thing called state. And here we're going to say if state if there's state, we are going to do a local storage dot get item. And what did I call it? It was redirect state. Just gonna wrap this in a try catch just in case something is goofy. What should I do here? We'll come back to that because I'm not sure. I just want to see if I can get this to work. So I'm going to do what did I call this thing? Redirect state equals parse that from local storage. Then we're going to say if redirect state dot state nonce equals redirect state, then so we have no route path otherwise, and if we get this far, then we're going to say our route path equals whatever was stored in state in this redirect state. And honestly, I don't think I really care. We should probably just like not have reject the authentication, but what's my error here? Route path is not used. Okay, so how do we actually do the redirect now? So we handle the redirect callback, set the user and all that stuff. I think what would I do is it window dot view go to route path JavaScript. Randomly Googling things, which is how we develop software often. Yeah, I don't have an instance of the router is the problem here. How would I do this as a just like window dot router dot push. Totally a chicken and egg thing because I'm in code that doesn't have a router. Okay, you may have noticed that router.push, blah, 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 are counterparts to history.push state, replace state, and go. They do, therefore, if you're already familiar with browser history API, manipulating is super easy, okay. It's worth mentioning that view methods work consistently in all router modes. History hash or abstract. Probably going to have to do this through the history API. So we would do history.push state, I guess. How does this work? History.push. Feels like the thing I want to call. Any help from the gallery? Nope, that's okay. Push state. Whenever the user navigates to state, pop state. Okay. I have some examples here. I feel like I shouldn't be stuck on this. I'm so close. I want to do let's just see what happens when I call something here. Not super confident about this approach, so I'm probably not going to submit it as into this PR just yet. Where was this? Did I handle redirect right? So we were doing if route path. I don't think that's going to work, but let's just see what happens. And then I think we're going to call it a night. Okay, I'm logged out. I click on emergency kits. I didn't set the path yet. I need to go do that before testing this. So what I wanted to do is this guy. Nope. Over in my route thing. Here. So we say so we're saying if some of them required, if any of those matched routes required auth, we were doing the login redirect. So what I'm going to do here is try to grab the path. So path. Because this guy, I believe, don't get good IntelliSense here with my setup. I feel like I'm missing something. But my login redirect method, login with redirect took in a route path. So I think that's what I need to do, is just send in the to.path. Let's see what that does. Okay, so I'm currently not logged in. I hope that, so I do have a state here, which isn't my state. My state must be like embedded in there somewhere. Let's see what happens. Okay, I have no idea what just happened, but let's take a look at, I wonder if there's anything in local storage. There's my redirect state, and it did have what I kind of expected. So I think what I need to do here is I'm gonna probably call it quits here, folks, but I do want to just see what the deal is here, and the way that I can stop this and just see kind of what happens is it really doesn't like me putting debuggers in there. Cool, I'll just do that. Okay, so log out. Go here and log in. I want to see if that state parameter is being set the way we thought it was. Oh, why didn't that work? I would have expected to hit that breakpoint. I'll do this the old-fashioned way. See what happens. Oh, I'm not even getting in there, which would explain why the debugger statement wasn't doing anything. There is my state though. So that state guy is there that we expected. Okay, there's a little piece that I don't understand how it's working with this redirect logic in here specifically, so I am going to handle redirect callback. I was sure that we were getting into this code. I'm a little bit surprised by this, but I'm out of time for tonight, so this will be the thing that I tackle next time when I dig into here. But I mean, at least we did add a small functional piece to the puzzle here, and hopefully next time we can dig into some of the like deeper functional bits of this application around emergency kits specifically. Thanks for joining, everyone. Hope you found this fun, coding on a Friday night instead of watching Netflix. But we'll catch you next time. Remember to like, comment, and share. So on YouTube, we are the Asp.Net Monsters, and we do live streams kind of ad hoc when we have the time to. But we do also have weekly videos where we talk about Asp.Net and Azure and just development on the Microsoft stack in general. And I'm also on Twitch under Dave Paquette, and that's kind of a new thing to me. So please follow along there and tell your friends. We'll catch you next time. Bye.